The first strange thing wasn't a message. It was the timestamp. I was half asleep, phone buzzing beside my pillow at 3:17 a.m. I almost ignored it. Nobody who cared about me texted that late. Anyone who did usually wanted something, or was drunk, or bored. But something made me check. The notification didn't show a name. Just a number I didn't recognize. No profile picture. No preview text. Just one new message. I opened it. Did it work this time? That was it. No emoji. No punctuación. No explanation. I stared at the screen, waiting for my brain to supply context it clearly didn't have. Wrong number, I thought. It happens. I typed back, sorry, wrong number. The message showed as delivered. Then read. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, another message came through. You said that last time too. I sat up in bed. My room was dark except for the faint glow of the phone. The fan hummed. Everything felt normal. Too normal. I think you have the wrong person. I typed, slower this time. Read receipt. No, the number replied. Same phone. Same response. Same deflection. My heart rate picked up. That subtle shift where your body knows something before your mind accepts it. I don't know you, I wrote. A pause. Then, that's the point. I locked my phone and set it face down, telling myself not to spiral. People troll. Scammers exist. Some idiot probably trying to mess with me. I slept eventually. By morning, I convinced myself it was nothing. Until I checked my phone again. There was another message. Sent at 3:19 a.m. You were closer this time. I didn't respond. I blocked the number. I went to work, distracted but functional. The day passed like any other. Meetings, emails, small talk that required half my attention. Every so often, I felt the phantom buzz of my phone, even when it was silent. That night, I checked my blocked messages. Nothing new. I slept easier. 3 days later, it happened again. Different number. Same time. 3:17 a.m. Okay, now I'm actually worried. My chest tightened. I sat up immediately, heart pounding. Who is this? I typed. Read. Better question. The reply came. Who were you before you decided not to remember? I stared at the screen for a long time. I searched my memory instinctively, like there was something obvious I'd misplaced. Trauma? Accident? Some dramatic event I'd suppressed? Nothing surfaced. I don't know what you're talking about, I wrote. That's what you said the first 2 cycles, the message replied. Cycles. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, I did what any rational person would do. I checked my medical records. No head injuries. No memory-related diagnoses. No gaps. I scrolled through old photos, messages, emails. Everything lined up. My life made sense, which somehow made the messages worse. That night, I left my phone recording audio while I slept, just in case. Nothing happened. No talking. No eslebualkin. No mystery behavior. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed anyway. You're protecting yourself better now, the message said. But you're running out of margin. I replied instantly. From what? 3 dots. Then nothing. For the first time, I felt angry instead of scared. I typed, stop texting me. Read. I can't, came the reply. You asked me not to. That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep and uncomfortable. I started noticing small things after that. A calendar reminder I didn't remember setting. An email draft saved but never sent, written in my tone but not my words. A note app entry that simply read, if you're reading this, don't panic. I didn't remember writing it. The metadata said I had. At 3:16 a.m., the night before the first message, my stomach dropped. I replied to the unknown number with shaking hands. What did I ask you not to do? The response came immediately. Tell you what happened. I sat there, phone in my lap, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something massive and dark. What happened? I typed. The typing dots stayed on the screen longer than before, then vanished, then reappeared. Finally, you won't like the version where you remember too early. I didn't care anymore. Tell me, I wrote. There was no response. At 3:17 a.m. the next night, my phone buzzed again. Same number. One condition, the message said. If I continue, you don't get to pretend later that you didn't choose this. I didn't hesitate. I choose. I typed. Read. You always do, came the reply. That's the problem. Then, for the first time, the message wasn't short. It was a paragraph. You didn't lose your memory by accident. You designed the gap. You said knowing the truth all at once would destroy your ability to function. You said pieces were safer, slower. You told me to stop you if you ever try to rush it. My hands went cold. This felt too specific, too structured, too calm. You said you'd recognize the signs when it was time. The message continued. The messages, the timing, the fear, the anger. You said if all that came back, then you'd be ready for the next part. What next part? I typed. There was a long pause. Then, the part where you find out why you erased it in the first place. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Something inside me knew this wasn't a prank anymore. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But I knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever I was protecting myself from, it was closer than I thought. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick, voice steady enough to sound believable, then sat on the edge of my bed for a long time staring at nothing. My phone lay face down beside me like a live wire. The thing that scared me most wasn't the messages anymore. It was how familiar they felt. Not in a nostalgic way. More like the feeling you get when you walk into a room and instantly know you've argued there before, even if you can't remember the words. My body reacted before my thoughts did. Tight chest, shallow breathing, that quiet sense of recognition you can't explain. At 10:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again, you're awake, the message said. I picked it up immediately. How do you know that? Read. Because you always stop pretending by day 4. Day 4 of what? I typed, deleted, typed again. Who are you? The reply came slower this time. Measured. I'm the part of the system you trusted more than yourself. System. I stood up and started pacing my apartment. Small place. Every step echoed my own thoughts back at me. I don't have a system, I wrote. I'm not sick. I'm not dissociative. I checked. 3 dots appeared. Paused. Appeared again. You checked what you were allowed to remember checking. That sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. Like this wasn't an emotional conversation at all, but a checklist being followed. I sat down again. If I erased something, I typed, tell me how. The response took almost a full minute. Not erased, the message finally came. Partitioned. I frowned. That's the same thing. No, the reply said. Erasure destroys. Partitioning preserves. Preserves what? I didn't ask. I already knew the answer would scare me. Instead, I typed, why text me? Why not email? Or write a note? Because you asked for friction, came the response. Texts wake you up. Notes don't argue back. My throat went dry. What did I ask you to do? I typed. The dots appeared instantly this time. Make sure you never get comfortable forgetting. I locked my phone and set it down, palms flat on the table, as if grounding myself physically could keep my mind from tipping over. This was insane. Either someone was manipulating me with information pulled from my own devices, or I'd done something to myself that I couldn't remember. Neither option felt survivable. I spent the afternoon tearing my apartment apart. I checked every drawer, every old notebook, every USB drive I could find. Most of it was normal junk, receipts, expired cards, scribbled to-do lists. Then behind a stack of old mail in a drawer I rarely used, I found a small black notebook. No label, no date, my handwriting. The first page was blank except for one sentence, written carefully, like I'd forced myself not to rush. If you're reading this and you don't remember writing it, that means it worked. My hand shook as I turned the page. There were only a few entries, not dated, just numbered. 1, you are not crazy. You are compromised. There's a difference. 2, do not trust how calm you feel. Calmness is part of the containment. 3, if you feel the urge to rush, stop. That urge is what broke you last time. Last time, I swallowed hard. The 4th entry was longer. 4, The worst part isn't what happened. It's how reasonable it felt while it was happening. That's why you asked to forget the logic, not the facts. I stared at that sentence until my eyes burned. I didn't remember writing it, but I recognized the thinking, the phrasing, the way it tried to warn without panicking. I checked the last page. There was one final line, written darker, heavier, like I'd pressed harder with the pen. 5. If the messages start again, it means you're strong enough now or desperate enough. Either way, you won't listen. I am sorry. I dropped the notebook. My phone buzzed on the table. 3:17 p.m. Not a.m. That alone sent a jolt through me. The message read, "You found it." I didn't ask how they knew. I didn't bother denying it. "Yes," I typed. "What did I do?" The reply didn't come immediately. Minutes passed. I realized I was holding my breath. Finally, the message arrived. You noticed a pattern that didn't want to be noticed. That was it. I felt anger flare hot and sudden. "That's vague on purpose," I typed. "Stop doing that." The response came back almost instantly. "Good," it said. "That reaction means you're still you." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "That's supposed to reassure me?" "No," the reply said. "It's supposed to tell me how fast to go." I sat back down, exhausted. "Start from the beginning. 3 dots. Then, you won't like the beginning. Try me." A pause. "You weren't looking for secrets," the message finally said. "You were looking for consistency." I waited. "You started noticing how often people explain things after they happened. How decisions were justified retroactively. How systems corrected for outcomes they claimed to predict." I frowned. This sounded like analysis. Not trauma. Not some buried crime. "You kept asking one question," the message continued. Not out loud. In your head. "If this was always the plan, why does it look improvised?" That sentence made my stomach twist. Because I'd asked something like that before. Recently. About small things. Policies. Processes. Even personal situations. I typed slowly. "That's not dangerous." "No," came the reply. "But you didn't stop there." My phone buzzed again before I could respond. "You started tracking contradictions. Minor ones. Timestamps that didn't align. Explanations that changed depending on who asked." I thought about the notebook. The logic, not the facts. What did I conclude? I typed. There was a longer delay this time. "You concluded that reality wasn't lying," the message finally said. It was negotiating. A chill ran through me. "That doesn't make sense," I wrote. "You said the same thing," came the reply. "Right before you proved it did." I pressed my fingers into my temples. "Prove how?" The dots appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. "You don't remember the night you stopped sleeping," the message said. "The week you kept recalculating the same event with different assumptions. The moment you realized the assumptions were the variable." I felt dizzy. "What event?" I typed. The response came slower now, like something being weighed. "Your own decision." I froze. "What decision?" The typing dots flickered, then held steady. "You noticed that every major turning point in your life had been preceded by a period where you felt certain you were choosing freely," the message said, "and followed by evidence that the options had already narrowed." My heart pounded. "That's just hindsight bias." "That's what you told yourself," the reply said, "until you found the constraints." "What constraints?" I demanded. There was a pause so long, I wondered if the number had gone dead. Then my phone buzzed again. "Information." I stared at the word. "You realize that what you were allowed to know shaped what you were allowed to choose," the message continued. Not dramatically, not obviously, gently, like gravity. I swallowed. This wasn't supernatural. This wasn't delusional. This was disturbingly plausible. "You started testing it," the message said, "asking questions in different orders, delaying decisions, introducing randomness. And every time, the system adjusted." "What system?" I typed. "The one you're using right now to read this." My pulse spiked. I looked around my apartment like something might physically reveal itself. "You're saying my phone?" "No," the message interrupted. "Not your phone. Through your phone." I stood up again, adrenaline surging. "So what? Algorithms?" Surveillance? Everyone knows that. Yes, the reply came. Everyone knows the shallow version. You found the deeper one. My hands trembled, which is another pause. You realized the system didn't need to predict you, the message said. It just needed to shape the range of futures you could see. That sentence sat heavy and awful in my chest, and I couldn't handle that. I typed. You handled it too well, came the reply. That's why you scared yourself. I closed my eyes. Images surfaced, not memories exactly, but sensations. Long nights, obsessive note-taking, that electric feeling of being on the edge of something enormous and undeniable. What happened then? I asked. The response came carefully. You started trying to step outside it. A cold wave washed over me. That's impossible. That's what you thought too, the message said, until you noticed the delay. What delay? The moment between stimulus and response, the reply said. You realized it wasn't fixed. My breathing grew shallow. So what did I do? The typing dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. You try to widen it, the message said, to create a choice that wasn't already priced in. And it worked, came the reply. Briefly, my stomach dropped. What happened when it worked? I typed. It was a long silence. So long I thought the conversation had ended. Then my phone buzzed. You panicked. I exhaled sharply. You said that seeing the mechanism didn't free you. The message continued. It paralyzed you. Every decision felt poisoned. Every thought suspect. That sounded accurate. Too accurate. You said you couldn't live like that, the message went on. But you also said you couldn't unknow it. So I erased it, I typed. No, came the reply. You contained it. I glanced at the notebook on the floor. You designed a delay, the message said. A way to let the knowledge back in slowly. In fragments. With resistance. And you? I asked. What are you? I'm the guardrail, the reply said. The thing you asked to push back when you rush. My chest felt tight. And what happens if I don't stop rushing? The dots appeared instantly this time. Then you reached the part you were most afraid of, the message said. The part where you decide whether ignorance was mercy or cowardice. I stared at the screen. Outside, the sun was setting, light fading into that uneasy gray where everything feels temporary. What happens next? I typed. The response came softer than before. Next, it said, you decide whether to keep the partition or open the door you closed. I swallowed. Ow! 3 dots. You already know, the message said. You just don't remember admitting it yet. My phone went silent. No typing dots. No follow-up. Just the glow of the screen fading as it locked itself. I stood there in my quiet apartment. Notebook on the floor, phone in my hand, heart racing with a truth that felt half remembered and half approaching. And for the first time, I understood why I'd been so careful to forget. Because some knowledge doesn't scream. It waits. And when it comes back, it asks you to choose again. If this story made you pause and think, stay with the channel. More real stories like this are coming. I found out the truth on a random Tuesday morning. The kind of morning where nothing bad is supposed to happen. No arguments. No warnings. Just coffee cooling on the counter and my phone vibrating with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it. If I had ignored that call, my entire life might still be a lie. The woman on the other end didn't introduce herself. She just asked my name, then paused longer than normal, like she was steadying herself. When she finally spoke again, her voice was tight and careful. She said there had been a mistake from years ago, one that involved a hospital, a baby, and paperwork that never should have existed. I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it sounded insane. I told her she had the wrong person. She didn't argue. She just said one sentence that drained the blood from my face. We believe you were sent home with the wrong family. The kitchen felt smaller after that, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I asked her to repeat it. She did, slowly this time. Calm, professional. like she was reading a grocery list instead of explaining that my entire existence might be misfiled. She said there had been a records audit, a long overdue one, a box of old files discovered in storage, 2 newborns, same day, same wing, same last name spelled almost the same, a nurse who retired early, a signature that didn't match. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to breathe. My hand was shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor just to stay upright. She told me I didn't have to do anything yet, that they weren't calling to force a meeting, that I could take time, that there were counselors available, that there were 2 families involved and everyone was being contacted carefully. 2 families. I hung up without saying goodbye. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the fridge. Childhood photos were stuck to it with magnets. Me at 5 missing a front tooth. Me at 10 holding a science fair ribbon. Me at 16 looking uncomfortable in a dress my mother insisted I wear. All those moments suddenly felt borrowed, like I had been living inside someone else's album. I told myself it had to be wrong. Hospitals don't just lose babies. Life isn't a movie. This stuff doesn't happen to normal people with boring jobs and student loans and a cracked phone screen. But once the thought takes root, it spreads fast. That night, I went to my parents' house, the one I had always called home, the same house where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway and cried over my first breakup on the stairs. My mom hugged me like she always did, warm and automatic. My dad asked if I wanted dinner. Everything looked the same, and that somehow made it worse. I didn't tell them. Not yet. I watched them closely instead. The way my mom brushed crumbs off the table. The way my dad cleared his throat before talking about serious things. I searched their faces for something I had never questioned before. Familiarity. Resemblance. Proof. I saw none. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying old moments with a new lens. The jokes about how I didn't look like either of them. The relatives who said I must take after someone far back in the family. The genetic health form I filled out once where everything felt like a guess. The next week was a blur. Emails, phone calls. A thick envelope arrived with photocopies of records older than me. Black and white forms. Dates. Signatures. One line highlighted in yellow that connected me to a name I had never seen before. My birth name. It felt foreign in my mouth, like trying to remember a word in a language I never learned. Eventually, I agreed to meet the counselor. She was kind, neutral, trained to keep her reactions behind her eyes. She explained that the other family had already been told, that they had a daughter too, that she was my age, that she had grown up believing she was someone else just like me. She asked if I wanted to see a photo. I said yes before I could stop myself. The girl in the picture had my eyes. Not kind of similar. Not close enough. Identical. Same curve. Same intensity. Same small scar on the eyebrow I got from falling off a swing when I was 7. My stomach dropped. That was the moment it became real. The first meeting happened in a quiet office with bad art on the walls. My parents came with me. They were pale, defensive, confused, hurt in ways they hadn't learned how to name yet. Across the room sat another couple, older than mine, more rigid. Their hands were clasped together like they were bracing for impact, and between them sat her, the girl from the photo. She looked at me like she was staring into a mirror she didn't trust. No one spoke at first. The counselor said something gentle, something about acknowledging emotions, something about no one being at fault. I didn't hear most of it. All I could think was that someone else had lived my life, or I had lived hers. The conversation was awkward, painful, polite in the way funerals are polite. We exchanged small facts. Jobs, cities, pets. None of it mattered. Everything mattered. Afterward, the families agreed to stay in touch. Slowly, carefully, like handling glass. At least, that's what everyone said out loud. What no one said was how fast things started changing. My parents became quiet around me. Not cold, not cruel, just careful, like they were afraid of holding me too tightly in case I slipped away. My mom cried in the bathroom more than she realized. My dad started calling me less. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know what to say anymore. And then there was the other family. They reached out constantly, invited me over, asking questions about my childhood, offering to share stories about my birth mother, who had passed away years ago without ever knowing the truth. They spoke with a kind of longing that made my chest ache, like they were trying to memorize me before I disappeared again. I felt torn in half, loyal and curious, grateful and resentful, loved and displaced. But the worst part wasn't the confusion. It was the realization that someone, somewhere, had known. Because as more records surfaced, it became clear this wasn't just a paperwork error. There had been complaints. A nurse flagged inconsistencies. A supervisor dismissed them. A settlement quietly paid years later for an unrelated incident. Someone chose silence. Someone chose convenience over 2 lives. And once I understood that, once I realized this wasn't just a tragic accident, but a buried decision, something inside me hardened. Because if my life had been swapped like a label on a file, then the truth didn't just deserve to be known. It deserved to be answered. After that meeting, everything unraveled faster than I expected. It wasn't dramatic at first. No screaming. No sudden confrontations. Just quiet shifts. Subtle ones. The kind that change your life without making sound. My parents stopped correcting people when they called me their daughter. Not because they didn't believe it anymore, but because they were afraid of what it meant. I could see it in the way my mom hesitated before introducing me to someone new, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing and losing me forever. My dad became distant in a way that hurt more than anger ever could. He still showed up, still helped, still asked if I had eaten, but something essential had cracked. I started visiting the other family more often. At first, it felt like I was cheating on my own life. Like I was betraying the people who raised me just by sitting at another kitchen table. But curiosity has a gravity to it. And once you step into it, it pulls you deeper. Their house felt strange, but familiar. Different layout, different smells. But the energy was oddly recognizable. Their jokes landed the way mine did. Their silences felt the same. And the girl, the one who grew up where I was supposed to, she felt like a missing limb I'd never known I had. We talked for hours. About everything. About nothing. Childhood stories overlapped in ways that made us stop mid-sentence and stare at each other. Same fears. Same habits. Same stupid comfort shows we watched on repeat. It was unsettling. Comforting. Terrifying. But the more time I spent there, the angrier I became. Because once you stop blaming fate, you start asking who benefited. The hospital had already issued a vague apology, carefully worded. No admission of wrongdoing, just enough regret to sound human without sounding guilty. Lawyers were suddenly involved. Not just theirs, ours too. Everyone was being advised to be cautious. That word started to feel disgusting. Cautious meant quiet. Cautious meant compliant. Cautious meant letting this disappear again. I asked questions no one liked. I asked why the original nurse's report had been ignored. I asked why a settlement had been paid years later under a different case number. I asked why a supervisor had signed off on documents without verification. And most importantly, I asked why no one had contacted us sooner when internal audits happened years ago. The answers were always the same. Time has passed. Records were incomplete. There was no intent. It wouldn't change anything now. That last one broke something in me, because it had already changed everything. The breaking point came when I found out my biological mother had suspected something. Years ago, she'd raised concerns about a birthmark that didn't match hospital notes. She'd been told she was emotional, overwhelmed, a new mother seeing patterns that weren't there. She died believing she was wrong. That night, I cried harder than I ever had. Not because I lost something new, but because she never got the chance to find me, or her real daughter, or the truth. And I decided then that silence was no longer an option. I didn't want money. I didn't want headlines. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted accountability. When I told my parents what I planned to do, my mom begged me to reconsider. She said it would reopen wounds, that it would hurt everyone, that we could still be a family without dragging this into the open. My dad didn't say much. He just asked one question. Are you doing this because you're angry or because you need answers? I told him the truth. Both. The investigation that followed was brutal. Emails resurfaced. Testimonies conflicted. Retired staff suddenly remembered things they'd forgotten for decades. The hospital denied responsibility while quietly pushing for a private resolution. The other family hesitated at first, afraid of losing what little peace they had found. But when they learned about my biological mother's unanswered concerns, they joined me. Together, the media eventually caught wind, not because we called them, but because institutions leak when they feel threatened. Suddenly, this wasn't just a clerical error. It was a systemic failure, a culture of dismissal, a decision to protect reputations over people. Strangers began recognizing me, some with sympathy, some with judgment, some asking questions they had no right to ask. I learned quickly how invasive curiosity can feel when your identity becomes public property. And through all of it, my relationship with both families evolved in painful, unexpected ways. My parents struggled the most. They weren't villains. They weren't victims either. They were people who loved a child they thought was theirs and feared losing her to truth. We argued. We cried. We sat in silence. There were moments I thought we wouldn't survive it. But love, real love, adapts. The other family had to grieve twice. Once for the daughter they thought they raised, and again for the years they lost with me. There was no way to undo that pain. No justice that could give time back. The girl, my counterpart, made a decision that surprised everyone. She chose to keep her life exactly as it was. Same parents, same city, same name. She told me she didn't want to rebuild her identity from ashes. I respected that. Chose différente. I changed my last name, not to replace anyone, but to acknowledge both truths. I didn't abandon my parents. I didn't erase my past. I expanded it. Painfully, deliberately. The case ended quietly. No courtroom drama. No verdict read aloud. Just settlements, policy changes, and a written acknowledgement that procedural failures caused irreversible harm. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Years later, when people ask me who my real family is, I don't answer the way they expect. I tell them I have more than one. And that truth, messy, complicated, uncomfortable, is something I had to fight to own. I don't know what I would have chosen if that phone call never came. If the mistake stayed buried. If my life remained simpler. But I do know this. Knowing the truth hurt more than ignorance ever did. But living a lie would have cost me more. If you were in my place, would you have opened that door? Or left your life untouched? I'd genuinely like to know what you think.